Do you ever feel safer alone, even when you want love? Sometimes the quiet feels easier than closeness, and the distance feels calmer than the warmth you wish you could accept. If you've ever wondered why your heart retreats, even when it wants connection, this story is for you. Loneliness has a quiet way of wrapping around us, not always as pain, sometimes as protection. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it simply becomes the place we retreat to when the world feels too loud, too close, too unpredictable. Many people don't talk about this version of loneliness, the one that doesn't feel like suffering, but like safety. The version that whispers, "Stay here, no one can hurt you." In this story, we explore that quiet space. Not the lonely nights filled with heavy silence, not the aching feeling of wanting someone who isn't there, but the softer loneliness, the one that comes with relief, the feeling that distance gives you room to breathe. Think about moments when you've stepped away from a crowded room, when connection felt like pressure, when conversations felt like noise instead of warmth. You move to the side, or maybe outside, and suddenly the air feels lighter. Your chest feels less tight. You feel like you can finally hear yourself again. Maybe you've felt this after a relationship ended, not the heartbreak part, but the strange calm that appeared afterward, the sense of returning to yourself. No expectations, no disappointments, no misunderstandings, just you. Or maybe you've felt it around people you care about. You didn't stop loving them, but being close felt exhausting. There's a part of you that tenses up when others get too near, emotionally, physically, or both. Not because you don't want closeness, but because closeness means being seen, and being seen means being vulnerable. Loneliness protects you from that. It creates predictable space, a space where your thoughts can breathe, where your emotions don't have to fit someone else's timing, where you don't have to wonder what another person truly thinks of you, where you don't need to explain yourself, justify your feelings, or adjust your needs just to keep the connection alive. And so, over time, loneliness slowly becomes familiar, not comfortable in the warm sense, but comfortable in the safe sense. Like an old room you know by heart, the light, the shadows, the silence, everything follows rules you understand. Love, on the other hand, is unpredictable. It shifts, people change, feelings rise and fall, and no matter how secure the connection is, there's always a part of you that stays aware, alert, because love can be lost. Loneliness can't be lost. It waits where you left it. Let's imagine a symbolic scene. A small cabin in a quiet forest. Inside, it's warm. A single lamp glows. The floors creak only when you walk. The world outside is dark, but still. No sudden knocks on the door, no unexpected voices, just the hum of your own breathing. When you step outside the cabin and walk toward the town, the noise grows. More lights, more motion, more possibilities, but also more uncertainty. Some people crave the town, but others find themselves returning to the cabin over and over, even when they tell themselves they want company. You can love the idea of connection and still feel safer in distance. It's not because you're broken. It's because your experiences have taught you something. That closeness often comes with risk. Maybe you grew up in a place where emotions weren't safe. Maybe people reacted unpredictably when you opened up. Maybe you learned early on that sharing your heart could lead to rejection, criticism, or silence. Or maybe you're someone who feels deeply. So deeply that even small misunderstandings cut like large wounds. And over time, you start telling yourself, less closeness means less pain. This isn't weakness. This is self-protection. The mind learns, the heart remembers. And loneliness becomes a shield we hold without noticing. When people say, just open up, they don't see the years behind your quiet, the history behind your hesitation, the instinct you built to survive emotional storms. Loneliness isn't just a lack of people. It's a place your heart goes when it doesn't feel safe yet. And the truth is, for some, solitude feels more stable than love. When you're alone, you know what to expect. When you're alone, you control the story. When you're alone, there's no sudden shift in tone, no confusing silence, no slow withdrawal of affection. Just your own presence, your own voice, your own peace. But here's the quiet irony. Even though loneliness feels safer, it doesn't always feel fulfilling. People often sit in that space with a strange mix of comfort and emptiness, wanting connection, but fearing the cost of it. This story isn't about judging that space or telling you it's wrong. It's about understanding it. Because loneliness, especially the safe kind, holds clues. Clues about what you need. Clues about what hurt you. Clues about what still feels unfinished inside. And understanding those clues is the first step toward gentler, healthier connection. Not by running from loneliness, but by listening to what it's trying to tell you. The real problem isn't loneliness itself, it's the tension between two deep human needs, the need for safety and the need for connection. Most people assume those two needs naturally fit together, but for many, they collide. Connection brings warmth, understanding, and companionship, but it also brings risk. Risk of rejection, risk of being misunderstood, risk of judgment, risk of becoming dependent on someone who may not stay. Safety brings peace, stability, and control, but it also brings emptiness. It limits growth. It limits emotional expansion. It limits the chance for true closeness. Inside many people, these needs pull in opposite directions. You move toward connection, then retreat into loneliness. You want to be seen, but fear what will happen when you are. You want love, but fear that love always comes with pain. So, you hover between the two, close enough to feel the warmth, far enough to avoid the burn. Let's dig into the hidden layers behind this conflict. For many, the fear of love isn't really about love itself. It's about past experiences that left marks. Sometimes the marks are small, tiny comments that made you feel too much. Moments when you shared something vulnerable and the other person didn't take it seriously. Times when you tried to express yourself and felt ignored. Other times, the marks are deeper. People who left when you needed them. People who promised things they didn't keep. People who changed without explanation. People who saw your softness as an opportunity to take advantage. When these experiences repeat, the heart quietly learns. It learns not just to be cautious, but to expect disappointment. And once you start expecting disappointment, closeness becomes a threat. Another layer of the problem comes from emotional habits formed in childhood. If you grew up in a home where expressing emotions wasn't safe, where vulnerability was dismissed, mocked, or ignored, then your mind may have learned early on that solitude is the only place where feelings are protected. In such environments, being quiet, self-contained, or emotionally distant wasn't a flaw. It was survival. And survival patterns stick, even when you grow older, even when life changes, even when safer people enter your world. Your mind doesn't easily update the rules it created to protect you. Another hidden struggle lies in identity. Some people fear love because they fear losing themselves in it. When you're alone, your life is yours. Your decisions are yours. Your space is yours. But closeness requires compromise. It requires openness. It requires letting someone else's world touch yours. For those who value independence, or who are forced to be independent too early, this can feel threatening. There's also the pressure of being enough. Love, for many people, feels like a test of worthiness, a test of stability, a test of consistency. And when you're alone, you bypass the test entirely. You don't have to worry about disappointing anyone. You don't have to fear being judged for your flaws. You don't have to wrestle with the fear of not measuring up. Loneliness removes the mirror. Connection brings it back. Then comes the fear of unpredictability. Humans can be kind, supportive, and loving, but they can also be inconsistent. They can have bad days, shifting moods, silent moments, internal struggles. And for someone who is sensitive, intuitive, or emotionally perceptive, these fluctuations can feel overwhelming. It's not that you want perfection, you just want stability. And loneliness provides that. But the deepest layer of the problem is this. Loneliness feels safer than love when you haven't yet met the version of yourself who feels worthy of being loved safely. When you fear emotional exposure, you choose distance. When you fear loss, you choose detachment. When you fear repeating old wounds, you choose isolation. This doesn't mean you don't want connection. You do. You feel the longing, you sense the pull. But the fear is louder, and so loneliness becomes your default. You stay in the quiet place, not because it fulfills you, but because it protects you from the pain you don't feel ready to face again. This is the hidden struggle many people carry, a longing for closeness and a fear of the cost. And until those inner fears are understood, loneliness will continue to feel safer than love, even when the heart wants more. The solution isn't to force yourself into connection. It isn't to push past your boundaries. It isn't to just open up or stop being afraid. That kind of pressure doesn't create safety. It creates resistance. Instead, the path forward is gentle, slow, respectful of where you are emotionally. The first step is awareness, not action. Begin by noticing the moments when loneliness feels safest. Noticing is powerful. It reveals patterns that once stayed hidden. It brings clarity to instincts that felt confusing. Ask yourself quietly, what am I protecting myself from? What past moment does this fear remind me of? Where did I learn that closeness is dangerous? You don't need perfect answers. You just need honesty, because once you understand your instinct for distance, it softens, not immediately, but gradually. The next step is small exposures to safe connection. Not big leaps, not sudden vulnerability. Just tiny moments of allowing someone in, even 1%. Perhaps it's sharing a small thought. Perhaps it's allowing someone to ask how you truly feel. Perhaps it's letting yourself stay in a conversation a little longer before retreating. These small steps don't erase your instinct for solitude, but they teach your mind something new. Not every connection leads to pain. Not every moment of closeness becomes overwhelming. With time, your nervous system adapts. It learns safety in presence, not just in distance. Another part of the solution is learning to tolerate emotional uncertainty. Love will always come with some unpredictability. Not chaos, just natural variation. Learning to sit with small emotional shifts without assuming danger is a quiet skill. A skill that grows through practice. A skill that reduces the fear of closeness. Self-compassion also matters. Loneliness often grows from harsh self-talk. From the belief that your needs are too much, or that your past pain makes you difficult, or that your fear makes you unworthy. None of this is true. You are not difficult. You are not broken. You are human, shaped by experiences that taught you to be careful. As you recognize your worthiness, love begins to feel less threatening. The goal isn't to erase loneliness. Loneliness has its own wisdom, its own clarity, its own grounding presence. The goal is to create balance, room for solitude and room for connection. A life where you can return to yourself without running away from others. A life where love doesn't feel like danger, but like shared space. As you grow into this balance, something shifts. Loneliness stops being your safest place and becomes one of your many places. A resting point, not a permanent home. And love stops being a threat and becomes a possibility, not all at once, but slowly, gently, in small steps that honor your heart. If this story spoke to you, if it reflected pieces of your own quiet struggles, know that there is more to learn, more to understand, more to explore within yourself. But before we go deeper, something important needs to be said. You are not behind. You are not failing at relationships. You are not late to understanding love. Some people simply need more time to feel safe in connection, and there is nothing wrong with that. Emotional safety is not something you can fake. It's not something you can rush into. It's something that grows from quiet understanding. And understanding begins with observing your emotional world gently, without judgment. Maybe your instinct is to close off the moment someone asks a personal question. Maybe your chest tightens when someone says, "Talk to me." Maybe your mind goes blank when someone gets close enough to see your flaws. These reactions don't mean you don't want love. They mean your heart remembers something your mind doesn't always articulate. And so, part of the solution is simply slowing down enough to listen. Not listening to fear, but listening to what the fear is trying to protect. Often the fear says things like, "Don't lose yourself. Don't get hurt again. Don't depend on someone who might leave. Don't open up to someone who won't understand." These voices don't come from nowhere. They come from moments in your life where vulnerability wasn't met with care. So instead of fighting these voices, acknowledge them. Tell them, "I hear you. I'm not ignoring you, but I want to learn another way." Because healing never begins with force. It begins with cooperation between your past and your present. Another gentle shift is learning to let connection come to you in small, safe doses. You don't need to leap into deep relationships. You don't need to explain your entire story at once. You don't need to be emotionally available 24/7. Connection can be one brief moment at a time, one sentence, one shared laugh, one honest, quiet thought. Every small moment of connection teaches the heart that closeness is not always a danger signal. And here's something people rarely talk about. Sometimes the safest path to deeper connection begins with people who ask for nothing from you. A friend you feel calm around, someone who listens without pushing, someone whose presence feels steady, not demanding. These small, simple relationships can slowly retrain the heart to tolerate being seen. No rush, no pressure, just gentle repetition of safety. And then something subtle begins to change. The loneliness you once relied on begins to loosen its grip. It becomes one option, not the only option. One emotional home, not the permanent one. And you begin to see that love, real, healthy love, doesn't demand that you abandon the safety you built. It simply adds another layer of warmth around it, a layer that says, you can be yourself here. You don't have to hide. You don't have to choose between connection and safety, because the truth is, they can exist together. And as you begin to experience moments of safe connection, you might notice something unexpected. Your loneliness doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes less like a shield and more like a place of reflection, a place to return to, not a place you hide in. This shift is quiet, often invisible on the outside, but internally, it feels like space opening, like a window being cracked open in a room you didn't realize was stuffy. You breathe a little differently. You think a little differently. You trust yourself a little more. This is what emotional safety feels like when it begins. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. And steadiness becomes the foundation for connection. One of the gentlest parts of the solution is learning to stay present with your feelings, even the uncomfortable ones. Instead of shutting down the moment emotion rises, you let yourself feel just 1% more than before. You don't have to dive in, you don't have to analyze, you don't have to share it immediately. Just stay with yourself. A few seconds longer, a few breaths deeper, a few thoughts more honest. Over time, this builds emotional stamina, the ability to experience closeness without instinctively retreating. You learn to stay where you once ran from. You learn to soften where you once froze. You learn to trust where you once doubted. And this trust isn't about other people. It's about you trusting yourself to handle connection. Because one of the biggest fears beneath loneliness is this: what if I can't survive intimacy? But you can. You're already learning to. Another gentle shift comes from allowing yourself to be imperfect in relationships. You don't need to say the right thing every time. You don't need flawless emotional control. You don't need to be endlessly calm or endlessly strong. Real connection is built by two imperfect humans doing their best, not two flawless people performing stability. Allowing yourself imperfection opens the door to real closeness, because perfection is a cage, but authenticity is a bridge. When you stop expecting yourself to be perfectly healed before connecting, you let relationships become part of your healing. You let someone care for you even while you're still learning to care for yourself. And slowly, softly, your mind stops interpreting vulnerability as danger. It begins to see vulnerability as communication, as honesty, as a way to be known, not threatened. Another part of the solution is recognizing which fears belong to the past and which actually exist in the present. Many of the fears people carry into relationships are echoes, not active dangers. Echoes from childhood, from past heartbreak, from friendships that ended abruptly, from times when openness was punished rather than welcomed. These echoes feel real, because emotionally they are. But they aren't always accurate. Learning to differentiate between past fear and present risk is a slow emotional skill, but it frees you from reliving situations that no longer exist. You begin to ask yourself, is this fear happening right now, or is it something my heart remembers from long ago? Questions like this don't eliminate fear, but they loosen the emotional knots inside you. They bring clarity to what once felt overwhelming. They allow connection to approach without instantly triggering retreat. Another key part of the solution is giving yourself permission to receive. Receiving care, receiving presence, receiving kindness, receiving support, receiving love, even in small amounts. Some people feel safer alone because receiving feels dangerous. It feels like debt. It feels like surrender. It feels like losing control. But receiving is simply allowing yourself to be human. A human with needs. A human with emotions. A human who deserves warmth, not just independence. You don't need to accept everything all at once. You don't need to let people all the way in immediately. But practicing small moments of receiving gradually teaches your body that closeness is survivable. And once your body learns that, your mind follows. Another gentle step forward is understanding that love doesn't require you to abandon your solitude. Healthy love leaves room for both people to breathe. It doesn't crowd your inner world. It doesn't erase your boundaries. It doesn't demand constant availability. In healthy connection, loneliness doesn't need to disappear. It simply becomes a space you choose, not a space you escape to. A partner who loves you well will understand that solitude isn't rejection. It's part of how you recharge, part of how you stay grounded, part of how you remain yourself. And when you find someone who respects that, love stops feeling like a threat. It feels like companionship, like parallel paths that meet, not collide. Another insight is this: love doesn't replace loneliness. It reshapes it. You might still need quiet days, reflective nights, moments of stillness, but loneliness becomes less heavy, less sharp, less defining. It becomes one part of your emotional landscape, not the entire horizon. And when loneliness no longer feels like the only safe place, you open yourself to a world you once kept just out of reach, not out of weakness, but out of readiness. Because love becomes possible when safety becomes present, and safety grows when you give your emotions time, space, and compassion. This is the heart of the solution. Grow safety first. Let connection enter slowly. Let love come in quietly. Love that arrives gently is love the heart can hold. And as you continue walking this path, there's more to understand, more to explore, more to grow into. Your journey is not ending. It's unfolding. When you're ready, keep going. You don't have to understand everything before taking that next step. You don't need a perfect plan or a perfectly healed heart or a perfect sense of certainty about where you're going. Healing rarely arrives fully formed. It arrives in fragments, moments that feel like softness, returning to places that used to be tight and tired. Moments that remind you that connection isn't something you force, but something you slowly allow. And part of allowing is learning the difference between emotional exposure and emotional engagement. Exposure is when you feel pushed too far, too fast, and your heart shuts down because the moment is too overwhelming. Engagement is different. Engagement is when you feel present enough to connect, but safe enough to stay grounded. It's the middle ground, where healing actually happens. So much of your journey will be about staying in that middle ground, not hiding completely, and not throwing yourself into emotional seas you're not ready for. Healing is not about testing how much pain you can endure. It's about building the emotional capacity to feel without collapsing or retreating. This is why gentle, steady, slow intimacy becomes the safest path forward. It gives your nervous system time to adapt. It gives your heart time to unlearn the idea that closeness equals danger. And the more your body feels safe, the easier it becomes to stay present with others, without losing yourself or sacrificing your boundaries or pretending you're okay when you're not. One of the most transformative things you can do is simply allow your emotions to exist without labeling them as wrong. If you feel nervous, that's okay. If you feel hesitant, that's okay. If you feel unsure, that's okay. These are not signs that you aren't ready. They're signs that you are feeling something meaningful. Emotions don't prevent connection. Avoidance does. And every time you let yourself feel even a little, you move further away from avoidance and closer to genuine connection. There will be moments when you feel yourself wanting to step back into loneliness, not because it feels joyful, but because it feels familiar. And familiarity has a comfort that even emptiness can't erase. That's normal. You don't need to punish yourself for that instinct. You don't need to fight it aggressively either. Instead, think of loneliness now as a home you're renovating. You've lived in it for years. You know every corner, every shadow, every quiet room. But you're learning to open windows that were once stuck. You're learning to bring in light that used to feel too bright. You're learning to create a space that isn't a hiding place, but a resting place. A place you can return to for peace, not protection. And as you begin to let love exist alongside your solitude, you'll notice something shift inside you. You stop treating loneliness as an identity and start treating it as a feeling that comes and goes, not a definition of who you are. This shift is one of the most liberating parts of healing, because once loneliness stops defining you, love stops threatening you. You no longer feel like connection will erase you or consume you or demand more than you can give. You begin to understand that love is not an invasion. Love is an invitation to be seen without needing to explain everything, an invitation to rest without being judged, an invitation to bring your slow, quiet self forward, without fear that it won't be enough. And when you meet someone, friend or partner, who accepts your pace, who doesn't rush your growth, who understands the language of your inner world, you will feel a kind of safety you may not have felt before. Not the safety of being alone, but the safety of being met, seen, understood, not pressured, not pushed, just gently accompanied. Sometimes the most healing relationships are the ones that ask the least of you in the beginning. A conversation that doesn't require depth, a presence that doesn't demand performance, a connection that grows slowly, like a seed that refuses to be rushed. Let that be enough. Let slow be enough. Let small be enough. Your heart is not late. Your pace is not a mistake. Your journey is not behind schedule. Let yourself grow in the ways that feel right. Let yourself build trust the way someone rebuilds strength after an injury, patiently, compassionately, without shame. You are not learning how to love. You are remembering that you are capable of it. And in this remembering, there will be moments when you suddenly feel the old instinct to withdraw, moments when closeness feels too close, or someone's warmth feels too real, or vulnerability rises too quickly. When this happens, slow down, not away. Even one breath of stillness can change the entire trajectory of a moment. One breath tells your body that you're not in danger. One breath lets you stay in the present instead of slipping back into memory. Healing is not about eliminating fear. It's about learning to move with fear instead of against it. You don't need courage every day. You just need enough courage for the next moment, and then the next one, and then the next. If you take this approach, connection will not feel like a cliff you leap off. It will feel like a path you walk, slowly, steadily, with your own rhythm guiding you. And when love finally enters your life in a form that feels safe, you won't recognize it by intensity. You'll recognize it by ease, by softness, by the way your body stops bracing, by the way your breath feels less guarded, by the way silence between you and another person doesn't feel like abandonment, but comfort. You'll realize that love isn't something that takes from you. It's something that meets you, something that sits beside you in your quiet moments, something that doesn't ask you to be loud, to be understood. And when you reach that moment, you'll understand something you may have never believed. Loneliness protected you, but connection can protect you too. One gave you safety from pain, the other gives you safety within life. And you deserve both kinds of safety. You deserve a life where connection does not threaten your calm, and your calm does not isolate you from connection. You deserve relationships that allow you to breathe, to exist, to be imperfect, to be fragile, to be human. And when you're ready, even gently, even slowly, your next step is simple. Stay with the journey. Keep unfolding. Keep learning the softer ways your heart wants to be held. There's more ahead for you, more clarity, more understanding, more steps that don't feel heavy. Whenever you're ready, continue to the next story. There's more waiting for you. And slowly, almost quietly, you begin to notice something. When you no longer force yourself to be ready and instead allow yourself to simply be, the world around you becomes less threatening. Conversations feel softer. People's intentions feel less sharp. You still see the risks, the imperfections, the human flaws, but they no longer look like weapons pointed at your chest. They become features of life, details, pieces of someone else's story that have nothing to do with your worth. This is the quiet shift that makes love possible again. Not because you suddenly trust everyone, not because you fixed everything inside you, not because you opened your heart like a movie moment, but because you stopped demanding certainty from a world that has never offered certainty to anyone. Love does not require safety. It requires presence. And presence only becomes possible when you stop running. You start to understand something simple, something you were never taught. You don't need to be fully healed to be fully seen. You don't need to hide the messy parts. You don't need to prepare the perfect version of yourself for someone else. You don't need to silence your fears before you take a step forward. You just need to show up honestly. It sounds small, almost too small, but honesty is the doorway you've been avoiding for years. When someone asks how you're feeling, you tell them the real answer, not the edited version. When someone moves closer, you allow yourself to stay in the moment instead of rehearsing exits. When you sense connection building, you breathe through the instinct to run. You let the discomfort live next to you instead of controlling you. And that's how loneliness slowly stops being your default home. Not through force, not through sudden bravery, not through abandoning your instincts, but through holding two truths at the same time. I feel safer alone. But I still want to be known. The solution is not choosing one side. It's allowing both feelings to exist without letting either one define your entire life. And day by day, something shifts. You find yourself feeling less alert, less guarded, less tense in the presence of people who genuinely care. You start to recognize that love isn't a battlefield you must survive. It's a space you can inhabit at your own pace. You realize that someone who truly wants to be in your life won't need you to perform, won't punish you for your fear, won't take your hesitation personally. They'll just stay, quietly, steadily, respectfully, and that constancy is what helps your heart unclench, slowly, carefully, naturally. Love becomes something possible, not something dangerous, and loneliness becomes something optional, not something inevitable. Not because your fear disappears, but because your courage grows quietly beneath it. And this courage is not loud, it is not dramatic. It does not feel like a victory. It feels like a soft exhale. It feels like sitting beside someone and realizing you are not shrinking, not hiding, not bracing for impact. It feels like being alive, without preparing for loss every second. You begin to understand that love isn't a promise of safety. It's an experience of connection. And connection doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty, presence, and a willingness to feel, even when it's uncomfortable. That's the real solution. A small shift, a quiet permission, a gentle choosing. Choosing to stay just one moment longer. Choosing to speak one truth deeper. Choosing to allow one fear to soften, not all at once. Not in one grand transformation, but slowly, patiently, humanly. And at the end of this journey, which never truly ends, you stand in a different place. Not fearless, not fully healed, not unbreakable, but alive. Open enough, present enough, human enough to love and be loved. And that is more than enough to begin. So if you've made it here, if you're still listening, if something inside you feels a little lighter, or a little clearer, or a little understood, then let this be your quiet call to action. Keep going, keep learning, keep opening in small, honest ways. There's more waiting for you, more stories, more truths, more gentle steps forward. And if you want to continue this journey, the next story is here for you whenever you're ready. See you there.